All of our listeners know that we are all about our craft here on NRL Offside, JC. However, is it acceptable in a podcast to just sit and blink uncomprehendingly for 4 minutes? Mate, at this point, I realise that might actually work on YouTube, probably not on Spotify. People would think that they'd inadvertently stumbled on John Cage's 433. But what the hell was last Wednesday night, JC? What? Mate, I am utterly, utterly bamboozled by that performance from New South Wales. Mate, I need some of your help. I need some of your trademark wit and wisdom to help me understand exactly what happened to the Blues last week, mate. Give me something.
Yeah. Hello, Noz, and hello, listeners. Yeah, before I get into Origin, I just want to make a quick shout out to the Socceroos at the World Cup. We obviously, unfortunately, came back to earth against the US after the fantastic win against Turkey the week before. So fingers crossed we can get the job done against Paraguay on Friday. And I think a win there should all but secure us our progression into the next round. So go well, lads. Go the Socceroos. Okay, Origin, mate. Mate, I feel like I've seen this story play out a few times before. New South Wales dominating, and then, mate, all of a sudden our fortunes go the other way. Mate, we were pretty ordinary in the second half, to be honest. And no doubt we're going to unpack that a little bit later on in the program. So over to you, Captain Noz, to kick off our set.
But I like what you tried to do there. I like that you tried to throw us a little bit of misdirection, but there's no getting away from it. We're going to have to do an Origin post-mortem. Maybe that's not even the right word, Johnny. Maybe it's an Origin autopsy. That New South Wales performance was pretty much dead in the water. So the Origin debacle will be featuring quite heavily, but it isn't the only thing we're going to be discussing this week, listeners. So speed round. I know people are probably starting to sort of distrust when we say this, but we are rededicating ourselves to speed round this week, JC. We're going to try and get in under that 7-minute mark. What caught our eye? Now, you're going to be chatting about one of the game's most important yet underrated aspects. I'm going to be doing my usual rambling about rubbish. The grapple, well, I suppose we've tipped our hand a little bit. It is pretty much going to be an Origin therapy session. We were a beast hit away from bringing in a psychologist for the grapple this week, Johnny, but we're going to support each other through it. The round preview. Now, it's our weekly attempt at some sort of meaning in our lives. But I'd just like to note that on NRL Tipping, which is my platform of choice, I am 153,418th. And I can barely say that number, JC. But what I do know is that it's pretty much the very definition of mediocre. Now, I don't know if you remember this either, JC, but we are doing our Freaky Friday body swap this week as well. Now, just a note to you, it is the Lindsay Lohan, Jamie Lee Curtis, not P. Diddy version of that. You will be impersonating me for the Chooks game. I'm going to be channeling you for the Parramatta encounter, so don't you forget about that. And freeballing. But it's actually back to you this week. You've got a bit of a review of something that you said earlier in our episode, so something for the listeners to look forward to at the end of the show. But on to speed round. Now, I've mentioned this, Johnny, we need to do some manifesting here. We need to think Usain Bolt in Beijing, think Chuck Yeager in the Mojave, think Twister in the Sauce, because
I feel the need for speed. Ow! I feel the need for speed.
Okay, Knights versus Dragons. Lift your arms up for the lap bar, JC, because the roller coaster ride that was round 16, well, that begins right here. A game that everyone expected to be a cakewalk ended up being anything but. The Saints gave the much more fancied Newcastle team a real run for their money, coming back from a 12-0 deficit and actually scoring 4 tries to the Knights 3. However, St George couldn't quite shake that little black cloud that's been hanging over their head for the season, and Val Holmes' 2 missed conversions were the difference between a rare-stirring victory for the Big Red V and another soul-crushing defeat. As for the Knights, they may not have been playing Monopoly, but they sure used their get-out-of-jail-free card. Tigers versus Dolphins. Johnny, for some reason this game played on a delightful Saturday afternoon at Campbelltown under crystalline blue skies flecked with purple clouds. Well, it reminded me of the old Saturday Arvo games that were broadcast on the ABC. And parts of this game, like Cody Nicodema's sublime 5'8" play, were definite throwbacks. Others, like Sione Faina's double from kicks, well, they were a sign of the times. And speaking of signs of the times, how about these Redcliffe Dolphins? They didn't quite cruise to the win. The 34-22 scoreline actually flattered them slightly, but they now have 7 straight wins under their belt. Titans versus Panthers. Well, this game was the point of the round where the roller coaster really went loop to loop. What looked like another day at the office for Penrith after they ran to a quick 12-point lead became an absorbing contest where the Titans ran to an improbable 18-12 scoreline with 12 minutes to go. However, this is the Penrith Panthers. Lindsay Smith's 73rd minute 4-pointer evened up the scores. But cometh the hour, cometh the charger. Rocking a throwback jersey that was worn before he was born, young Zane Harrison stepped up to calmly pot the winning field goal, leading to the most improbable of Gold Coast victories. Bulldogs versus Sea Eagles. The fizz and pop of Fosball, whatever it actually is, came up against good old-fashioned doggies defence on Saturday night. What transpired was a grit and grind Canterbury Bankstown special, all sealed by a calm-as-you-like-it Stephen Crichton field goal in Golden Point. And Coach Foran, welcome to the rollercoaster ride that is coaching in the NRL. If you have a few more grey hairs as a result of Fogarty's missed goals and the field goal mismanagement in Golden Point, there are likely plenty more to come.
Let's move to the Warriors versus the Cowboys. The first thing I want to say is, what about that new stadium in Christchurch? Wow, it looked, mate, it looked amazing on TV. I can already see a second New Zealand team being based down there. Now, not something you see too often in a game is one player from your team scoring the first 4 tries.
Yeah.
So well done to Charles Nickel Kotstadt. Mate, the Whales were always in control of this one. The Cowboys, to be honest, never really threatened. And obviously, Toddy Payton would have been pretty disappointed, especially after re-signing an extension to his coaching contract. Let's move to the Storm versus the Raiders. Mate, what a super fast start by Canberra. I think they scored 3 tries in the first 15 minutes. They were on fire. They were literally cruising in this match. And then in a blink of an eye, Melbourne roared back to 16 all. And look, I didn't watch the full game. I was watching the mini version. But, geez, how many catches in the air did Will Warbrick take? Mate, he bagged 3 tries and also set up a few others as well. In the second half, Melbourne ran away with it. Canberra, they're now second last on the ladder, and what a huge fall from grace for those guys, especially last year after winning the minor premiership. And Melbourne, they're on their winning run is continuing, and as long as they've got Harry Grant, Munster, Hughes, and co, I think their charge to the top 8 is looking pretty good. Let's go the Roosters versus my boys, the Sharks. Look, I was always confident, mate, we'd get the chocolates here. Mark, he was on fire and clearly outplayed his opposite number, Mr. Ronaldo. Look, I won't say on this program what I think about him, but let's just say I was pretty happy that Marky got over the top of him. Great to see the Origin boys backing up, and I thought Reece Robson had a very, very strong game. It's amazing what a difference it makes when he decides to run the ball. It really added another dimension to our attack, and I thought we looked pretty good him doing that. As for the Sharks, I've got to be honest, I didn't think they were great. We really handled their 2 most dangerous players, being Trindle and Kennedy, and clearly limited their impact. So very happy that my boys are back in the top 4, and let's just make sure we stay there. Roosters.
Mate, I think you were diplomatic about Mulatalo. I'm normally a Ronaldo fan. I like his energy. I like that irrepressibility he brings. But, mate, if you were going to use a word to describe him on Sunday night, it would start with a D and end with a head. Mate, Marky Mark made him look like an absolute goose. But that wasn't what caught our eye, Johnny. Mate, you have a very interesting thing that caught your attention over the weekend. What was it?
Look, mine's a little bit left field, mate, and it's probably about a topic that we don't talk about too much. It's about goal kickers, and it started with Sammy Walker's goal kicking in Origin 2, where he nailed 8 from 8, if you remember. I reckon 4 of those were right on the sideline, and he absolutely struck them all over the black dot. And then then on the weekend against the Sharks, he only lands 2 from 5. But look, over the weekend, where it also caught my eye was that we saw 2 games where the team that actually scored more tries than their opposition, being the Dragons and then the Seagulls, they both ended up losing their matches, and obviously
Yeah.
goal kicking was the difference. And it just really highlights to me, mate, how important it is these days for every team to have a pretty reliable goal kicker. And I think probably somebody that can consistently probably land 80% or better. If you're scoring more tries than your opposition, clearly it's going to give you a huge chance of winning games. But obviously, if you don't, you just need those. You need those extra points, and it sort of leads me to thinking about. And I've been thinking about this for a little while now. Is Jermaine Asako the best goal kicker of the modern era? I honestly don't think I've seen anyone better. The way this guy strikes a ball, especially from the sideline, the way he can shape it, curl that ball, bring it back over the black dot is just incredible. And look, when he kicks it from that left-hand side, it's just extraordinary to watch. He very, very rarely misses. On the weekend, he had another perfect round where he landed all of his kicks. I think it was 6 from 6. And his conversion rate this season is very close to 90%. So I'm just putting it out there, but I honestly think that Jermaine Asako is probably the best goal kicker I've seen in the modern game. What's your take, Nos?
Yeah, mate. I mean, it's a very valid take. The thing about Osako, when he kicks the ball, he just has, mate, he almost looks like an elite golfer. Mate, he just has that beautiful rhythm of his stroke. There's an economy of movement. He's able to put power and precision into it. But I don't know the figures. So the best goal kicker is obviously the goal kicker that has the highest percentage. But, mate, Jermaine is right up there. And you're right, he is beautiful to watch. Another thing you were spot on about, mate, was the importance of good goal kicking. We saw on the weekend in those 2 games you mentioned, it was the difference between winning and losing. But, mate, I've got a slightly different take on it. Mate, if you think about Osako, if you think about all of the other kickers in the modern game, mate, they make the old generation of the kickers, the leather ball kicking toe pokers, mate, they make them look like diplodocus. It doesn't even look like they're doing the same thing. It's just completely different. And speaking of different, JC, mate, here we get to what caught my eye this week. Mate, I don't know who had the idea to rekindle the Gold Coast Chargers jerseys. Mate, on face value, it made about as much sense as re-releasing the debut album of Craig McLachlan and Check 1 2 or the Shantuzis. But, mate, I was proved completely wrong. It turned out to be an absolute stroke of genius. The jerseys themselves, well, they unveiled them in Magic Round and brought them back last weekend, but they were absolutely beautiful. They had the purple with the black bars. They had the teal. But, mate, even more unexpectedly, they gave the Titans a degree of gravitas. I mean, we know that most of the history of the football on the Gold Coast is a joke, but those jumpers just show that it is a real and tangible history, and somewhat interestingly, it gave some shape and character to the Titans. But even that, Johnny, that is not what necessarily caught my eye. In addition to bringing the Chargers jerseys back, mate, the Titans also resurrected Captain Charger. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Johnny, but for mine, there has never been a vaguely credible humanoid mascot. They all somehow end up looking like the Greendale human being. But Captain Charger, mate, with his dyspeptic colour scheme, with his disturbing bulges, he was actually the worst of the lot. But again, bit of counter-intuition here, mate. Seeing him on Saturday night was like the triumphant return of a long-lost friend. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to see the captain return every week. But if the Titans/Chargers bring him out once every year or two, mate, I am all for it. It gets 2 thumbs up from Noah's. Okay, there's a little bit of levity with that one, Johnny, but we can't avoid this, mate. It is time to bring out the scalpels and do our Origin autopsy. Mate, what in God's name just happened?
Mate, yeah, geez, yeah, where do I begin on this one? As I said in the intro, yeah, pretty dominant first half from the Blues, I thought. I actually thought we probably should have gone in the break with probably an even bigger lead and maybe scored a few more tries, even though, yeah, a few of our tries did come from some lucky moments, some lucky bounces. But then the second half, mate, how would I describe this? I'd probably say we were absolutely shocking. We just didn't turn up. There were so many things that went wrong in that second half for the Blues. Katoni Staggs, mate, defensively, this guy was a liability. He made a lot of errors, throwing stupid passes, missed opportunities, and then he had the brain explosion with the sim bin. So a pretty poor performance from him. Nathan Cleary, mate, he didn't play. And look, something that you don't see Nathan do too often is he missed a ton of tackles. I think he actually missed 10, which is very un-Nathan like. The interchange was also a major talking point. Our best forward, our guy that gives us all the push, Payne Huss, mate, he played limited minutes, which was strange. Reece Robson played 80, which I didn't expect.
Mm.
And his hooker on the bench, Appy, sat on the bench without even touching the field. I actually had a bit of a laugh during the week when Benji Marshall said that Appy was going to be fresh for the Tigers game of the weekend, and he still collected his $30,000. So well done, Appy, for that. I thought Yo also needed a spell, and I'm hoping in the next game that that Cam Murray starts the game. Your boy Mitchell Moses, I didn't think he offered much at all. So it was a pretty disappointing performance from the Blues overall. But as for Queensland, I think probably the biggest difference between us and them, even in game one, I just feel like Queensland at the moment are playing with a lot more freedom. Mate, they attacked, they moved the ball,
Yep.
they actually played football. And it probably was really highlighted with that unbelievable sort of play from Sammy Walker when he throws that sort of no-look pass out the back to Kalen. The timing was absolutely perfect. And we all saw what happened in the corner when Selwyn Cobbo scored that try. Just on Selwyn Cobbo, mate, he's having an outstanding season. And in Origin 2, I actually
Yep.
thought he was the best player in the field. So well done, Selwyn Cobbo. You were absolutely unbelievable. Look, we now go to game 3. Obviously, it's a decider, and New South Wales are pretty lucky because we all saw what happened in game 1, where probably Queensland would have won if KP was still in the field. So I'm really hoping that Mr. Liz makes some pretty big changes for game 3. We definitely need a team that's going to play a lot differently, and if we're going to be a chance up there in Suncorp, we've got to play a lot better in that second half in game 2. So as always, go the Blues, but it's going to be a tough battle up there.
Yeah, mate, I like your optimism. I like that you're operating under the assumption that Coach Daly actually has some sort of plan. I'm not entirely sure. But, mate, I'm going to resist my natural temptation at this point. The natural thing to do for us angry New South Wales fans is to do a Marcellus Wallace and go medieval in New South Wales' ass. But, mate, I'm going to accentuate the positive here. I am going to take a moment to appreciate the Queensland performance. Mate, they were absolutely sensational in that second half. You mentioned Selwyn Cobbo. Mate, he was head and shoulders the best player on the field, but he had plenty of mates. Harry Grant was outstanding. Munster reversed his game worst performance in the first Origin to be a real factor. The Hammer, Sammy Walker, Ponga, Tino, and Flegler. Mate, there was barely an off performance amongst any of the players dressed in maroon. Some of their tries, particularly the ones down that left edge, mate, they were, in a word, magnificent. But New South Wales, mate, we can't avoid this. Mate, the front rowers were non-existent. Our edges, particularly that right edge, was as weak as water. And Cleary, mate, I know you don't like me talking disparagingly about your man, Nathan, but he did his usual Origin flake, and he was of no consequence whatsoever. But, mate, it all paled into insignificance beside Katoni Staggs. Mate, I love Staggs. I love his energy. I love his aggression. But on Wednesday night, it was like he'd been put into Rick Moranis's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids machine. Mate, he was a 0 in attack. He was a less than 0 in defence. The right edge that he was anchoring was a literal disaster. Perhaps it was only topped by New South Wales' general lack of direction. Now, game 3, what do we do? Now, I think we need to play Cam Murray for 80 minutes. He was outstanding. He was probably New South Wales' best player. Marky Mark, mate, he brought his inimitable flair and strike. A rare bright spot for New South Wales was his try in the first half. Mate, it's a term which is more commonly used in basketball, but he almost broke Selwyn Cobbo's ankles in scoring his first half try. Now, we can't go to Casey McLean. The New South Wales training staff picked in for their annual maiming, but even a half-fit Bradman Best would be better than Katoni Staggs at this point. New South Wales also needs some creativity at the ruck. I mean, Coruscant's the obvious option for that. But I have a nuclear option here, JC. I don't know what you're going to think about this. Mate, I think New South Wales have to contemplate dropping
Wow.
Nathan Cleary. Billy Slater had the cojones to do it after game one last year. He dropped DCE. Mate, that actually made the difference in the series. Mate, I think New South Wales are much better off with Mitchell Moses at halfback. We just need his kicking game. You talked about the first half. I think Mitchell Moses' kicking game was the difference in the first half, and Ethan Strange needs to come back into that team. He was arguably New South Wales' best player in game one, and we really missed his creativity and his speed. So, mate, that's what I would be looking to do if I was actually on the New South Wales coaching staff. Now, the final thing I'd like to mention just in relation to the New South Wales coaching staff, Johnny, you probably saw this at the end of the game, but all of the New South Wales coaches stood up and Coach Daly had a yellow notebook. Now, mate, I'm wondering what was in that notebook. Now, I'm going to be stepping on Vox Popping a little bit here, but I posed that question on a number of text threads after the game, and our favourite Vox Popper, Johnny Croak, actually came back with this. More brilliant content from Johnny. We're going to have to put him on a salary soon. Okay, let's try and lift our spirits here, JC. Let's go to this week's round preview.
All right, let's start with your boys, the Eels versus the Rabbitohs. Look, when I was previewing this game, mate, I was thinking that Latrell was going to be back, and obviously also hoping that he was going to be back for the Blues. Heard the news late last night, mate. He's out, and he's also going to be out for game 3 for the Origin. Look, this probably puts the Rabbitohs a little bit back, but look, I really can't tip your guys, mate. I want to see a bit of an upset here, but mate, I'm just not confident at all. I know that Mitchell Moses is probably going to be back, but I just can't see your boys beating the Rabbitohs. So I'll go for the Rabbits. I still think they've got a few big name players in their team, so I think the Rabbits might win comfortably, mate. There you go.
Mate, you're supposed to do the body swap for the Roosters game, not for the Eels game. I'm supposed to be you for this game, not vice versa. But again, here I am, guys. I am channeling my inner Johnny for my round preview for the Parramatta game this week, just to placate Norbs. Okay, so here we go. Despite missing a lot of players, my boys looked super great in our last outing against the Raiders. Moses is going to be back for this game. That's going to give us some added strike power. He'll probably be looking to make amends for his subpar performance in Origin. But the real key to this game for Parramatta is Isaiah Iongi, who is starting to find his feet after an extended stretch on the sideline. I think it is only a matter of time, JC, before he becomes the greatest fullback of all time. The Rabbitohs, despite another unfortunate training injury to Latrell, will be raring to go after their last strong outing against the Broncos. They also match up very well against an Eels team that struggles defensively at the edges, but I cannot see my super great boys losing this one, JC. I am tipping the Eels to win this encounter, and more than that, I think it's going to start a 39-game winning streak that's going to culminate in us winning this year's grand final, but more than that, next year's grand final as well, Johnny. So here we go for the double. I am calling it right now. JC as no style.
Mate, you're a funny man. Okay, let's move to the Titans versus the Bulldogs. The Titans, they finally look like they got a genuine number 7 in their team with that young kid Zane Harrison. He played really well on the weekend. Well, the Dogs, they're still persisting with Galvin at halfback. I think we all know he's not a traditional number 7, but I've got to give Lachlan Galvin full credit. He definitely turns up every week, and he definitely tries. So, I thought he did that last week against Manly. This is a crucial game for the Dogs, mate, if they want to keep their finals hope still alive. Just on Stephen Crichton, mate, I was really surprised, mate. He was tried at 5'8". I just didn't think he looked overly comfortable. And then I heard late last night that Satili Tupanua, he's out for 8 weeks, and that's tough. That's tough luck for the Dogs. So I think he's been probably the Dogs' best player all year. So I'll lean towards the Titans. I think they're on a bit of a winning run at the moment. Obviously, this game's being played at home. So, go the Titans.
That's tough news for Satili. He's been plagued with injury in the past, but I think you were right. You said last week that he's been the best Bulldog this season, mate. I'd agree with that. And it's a real shame that he's going to be on the sideline for the next couple of months. Mate, this game is actually firming as an intriguing encounter. It is also a little bit of a clash of contrasts. We've got that defensive grind of the Bulldogs versus the attacking flair of the Titans. But I'm leaning a little bit towards the Gold Coast. It is being played at Fortress Seabus. They're also showing some promising signs. But, mate, this Canterbury team, it is starting to build a little bit of momentum. So if the Titans want to win this game, they're definitely going to have to turn up. I'm going for them, but, yeah, not a confident tipping, JC.
Okay, the Broncos versus my boys, the Roosters. This is a short turnaround for the Chooks, while obviously the Broncos are coming off the bye. On form, on paper, mate, you'd have to say the Roosters should win this one pretty comfortably. But Brisbane playing at home, and obviously they're quite desperate for a result. You can never truly write them off. I still think the Roosters, mate, will be too strong, and we should keep our top four push on track. I'm tipping Sammy Walker the star. I thought he was a little bit quiet against the Sharks, and I'm backing Marky Mark for a hat trick.
Mate, it was either a case of you forgetting or just not having the stomach to actually channel me to do the Roosters preview. But if that was an impression, mate, that was actually the worst impression of my tipping I've ever heard. It was sort of like me on nitrous oxide. Anyway, we'll see how we go. I'll keep working on you, Johnny. Mate, the Chooks. Oh, God, I'm always loath to give the Chooks a bit of a rap, knowing my audience, but mate, they were great against the Sharks on Sunday night. I know there were a few of the boys on our WhatsApp text thread that were a bit disappointed, but mate, they had good attacking play. They pretty much sort of played that process-driven game, which has sometimes been their Achilles heel. The Broncos, mate, they limped into the bye. They had a dismal performance against the Rabbitohs. And I'm actually starting to apply the same philosophy to the Broncos as I have for the Dogs over the last couple of weeks. Until they start showing something resembling form, I am not going to waste my breath on them. I actually think the Roosters will dish them up in this game.
I like to hear that, mate. Let's move to the Cowboys versus the Panthers. Look, Penrith should have all their big guns back. And even though this one's being played in Townsville, mate, I think the Panthers should be way too strong. I reckon Nathan Cleary, mate, he's going to be pretty keen to have a big game, especially after, as we said before, that pretty disappointing Origin performance in Game 2. I think the Cowboys they'll be competitive early, especially playing at home. But I just think, Penrith's class, mate, their experience, they'll show, and they'll probably end up running away with it in the second half. That's my prediction.
But the Cowboys pretty much did what everyone expected last weekend against the Warriors. They showed a little bit of a flair, but then they absolutely crumbled when the pressure was applied. On the other hand, Penrith did what nobody expected. They went to Seabus Stadium up on the Gold Coast, and a game that they were expected to win quite comfortably, they struggled. And again, I know they had the Origin stars out, but mate, that was a pretty interesting loss. In saying that, though, mate, I can't tip this Cowboys team. Mate, if you look at their record over the last 5 weeks, they had 2 good wins. They beat the Rabbitohs. They then beat the Roosters. Since then, they've just been leaking points. I think this Panthers side will really show their ruthless streak. I think they're going to come out and they're going to give them a hiding. But the interesting thing, JC, is North Queensland actually beat the Panthers twice last season. The only difference being that the 2025 version of the Panthers is vastly different to this year's model. I think the Cowboys are just about to find that out as well. Mate, I am going for Penrith, and if this is the margin game, I shall be putting up a big score.
Let's move to the Sea Eagles versus the Storm. Bit of the Battle of Brookie. You remember that performance many years ago? Probably the first question I'm just going to pose is Manly starting to just come off the ball a bit and starting to feel a bit of the pressure? Their last month of footy, I don't think has been that great. They've had a couple of lucky wins and obviously some disappointing losses. On the other hand, as I said earlier, that mate, the Storm they're building nicely and now on a bit of a winning streak. Playing at Brookie, obviously, Manly will always lift, and clearly they're going to need a bit of a response. But this one I'm feeling is going to be a bit of a tough one to call. Part of me says the Eagles because they're playing at Brookie, but I'm actually leaning towards Melbourne. I just think, mate, clearly they've just got too many big name players in that side. So I'll lean towards the Storm.
Yeah, mate. We talked about this in the preview of last week's round. The Seagulls have a couple of questions I need to answer. They seem to have lost their momentum. It's probably premature to say their attacks deserted them, but mate, they just haven't got that sparkle that they had for the first 4 or 5 weeks of Kieran Foran's tenure. And in this game, mate, they are coming up against the NRL's Death Eaters, the premium momentum killers in the Storm. In saying that, it's not a usual Storm. You looked at Sunday's resounding victory against the Raiders, mate. I think that was more more about how bad the Raiders are than how good the Storm are at present. Yeah, Warbrick cut them to pieces, but mate, that Raiders team is abysmal. I am leading the Storm. I think the Seagulls have come back to earth, and again, I think that they won't have what it takes to overcome this this grit and grind Melbourne team.
Let's move to the Raiders versus the Dragons. Look, this is this is an interesting one. It's the battle of last versus second last. I'm just sort of surprised I'm even saying that. Look, no one in their wildest dreams would have thought Canberra would be coming second last at this point in the season. The Dragons have, mate, they've definitely improved over the past month. I actually thought they were a little bit unlucky against the Knights. As I said, they actually scored more tries, but still came away with the loss. But I think with this one being played in Canberra, I'll go with the home side. But yeah, I think it's probably still a danger game for Canberra down there.
Mate, who do you go for in this game? You'd think that the smart money would be on Canberra, but mate, that's just on fumes. That this Canberra team is literally a shadow of themselves. We keep expecting them to rekindle some of that form they showed to take them to the minor premiership last year. And if anything, they're going in the other direction. Mate, the strength of this Dragons team, now that might be overstating it because there's not too many strengths in this Dragon team, but mate, their young forwards have really started to show a little bit of verve and a little bit of spirit. And mate, the Raiders, they've shown no resolve in the middle. I think this is going to be a really interesting clash. You can't tip against the Raiders. I mean, this is the Dragons and they're playing away, but this is definitely a spoon preview, mate. I'm going for Canberra, but I think it's going to be an encounter between two teams that are really sort of plumbing the depths.
Let's go to the Knights versus the Tigers. Yeah, probably two of the bigger improvers of this year's season. Mate, clearly Newcastle have surprised us. They've had a pretty solid year and they're firmly entrenched in the top 8. I'll be honest, the Tigers, mate, they had their chances against the Finns last week. I thought Luai, starting to show a little bit of rhythm the last couple of weeks, and I'm hearing that Adam Dewey may return. So I think that's a big up for them. He adds clearly a little bit more attacking threat and could definitely cause the Knights some headaches. But I just think with this game being played in Newcastle, and very likely Kalen Ponga will return, I'll tip the home side.
But these teams are pretty similar. They're both young, they're full of running, but they are still prone to defensive lapses and losing their way. You're right about Luai. Luai has been resurgent over the last couple of weeks. And, mate, that Tigers performance, I said it in speed round, mate, the scoreboard didn't indicate how close the match was. In terms of the Knights, mate, they weren't very good against the Dragons. They were a couple of Val Holmes goal-kicking miscues away from a very embarrassing defeat. And in light of that, Johnny, I'm actually going for a relative smoky here. I know the Knights will be favourites actually playing up in Newcastle. I think they've been pretty arsey over the last couple of weeks with their wins. Also, if you look at the Tigers' record, it's a pretty consistent win-loss pattern. I think the Black and the Golds are actually going to pull an upset here, mate.
Bold tip. Nice one. Let's go to the game of the round, and it's the Dolphins versus the Warriors. Mate, this should be a great clash. Mate, both sides are pretty physical, but clearly they both love to attack with the football. They're both in good form, and you'd probably have to say that the Finns probably over the last 2 months have clearly been the form side of the competition. This game's going to be played at Suncorp, so I'm expecting a pretty fast track. I think it's going to be a pretty massive crowd. I know that the Warriors have a lot of support up in Brisbane, and the way I'm sort of seeing this, I think whoever wins this match, I think is clearly going to be entrenched in the top 4. And I think probably the team that wins this will probably be the team that will finish either second behind Penrith. So, this is going to be a pretty entertaining clash. And, mate, I'm leaning towards the Dolphins.
But no surprise. You mentioned the fact that the Warriors have a big fan base in Brisbane. Mate, despite that they've been historically ordinary at Suncorp. But Mate, this edition of the New Zealand Warriors is built a little bit differently. I actually think they're going to give the Finns a real run for their money. I also think the Finns are actually due for a loss. Mate, despite the fact that they're riding high, no team wins every game. I mean, we've seen that with Penrith this year. They're obviously the cream of the competition, but they're going to have an inevitable defeat. The thing about the Finns as well is they are playing really well offensively, but they haven't really faced a top-notch opponent in a while, particularly someone that can sort of grind them down defensively. So I'm actually going for another smoky here, JC. This probably doesn't bode well for my tipping results next week, but I am going for the Warriors, mate.
No.
Okay. Wait. Again, it's always good to throw a few in there, JC. And speaking of throwing a few in there, mate, it is your free balling this week. Now, I've had a bit of a look at the notes, and I'm actually going to call it a free balling. I think it's a free balling rather than a wit and wisdom.
'Cause I'm free balling.
But give it to us, mate. What have you got for us?
All right, for free balling this week, I'd actually thought I would review my top 8 predictions from the start of the season and just see how they're tracking against the current ladder. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to reveal my updated prediction for the top 8 for the remainder of the year. So if you remember back in round 1, this was my prediction for the top 8, and I know it sort of ruffled a few of the feathers in our little school group chat when I said something about the Bulldogs. But just a quick reminder, this is what I said back in round 1. I said Penrith will come first, Storm second, Roosters third, Canberra fourth. Then I had Sharks, Broncos, South, and then I was torn for that 8th spot, either the Warriors or the Dogs. All right, let's fast forward. After 16 rounds, I think it's pretty clear that Penrith are still sitting where I expected, right at the top. Clearly, the biggest changes after round 16 is clearly been Melbourne and Brisbane, who are both currently outside of the top 8, also along with the Bulldogs. Mate, the big improvers this year have been clearly Newcastle, Manly, and obviously South from where they were last year, and then the Dolphins. Mate, all of these teams have clearly probably exceeded expectations when you look at their position on the ladder. So this is my updated top 8 prediction to finish season 2026. Penrith clearly will come first. I've got the Dolphins coming in at number 2. Got my boys, the Roosters, 3. I've got the Warriors rounding out the top 4. Then we go to Manly, 5. I think South will sneak in at 6. Sharks, as we always say, they're always there or thereabouts. I'll come in at 7th. And I've got the Melbourne Storm continuing that little winning run at the moment, and they will finish 8th. And hear this for the finale. This is my predicted grand final matchup. Probably no surprise with one of the teams, but wait for this. I'm going for a Redcliffe, as you call them, Dolphins versus Roosters grand final, mate. They're putting it on the record. Dolphins versus Roosters GF.
Mate, for a while there, it was almost sort of starting to morph into a wit and wisdom, and then it became the most free of balling, mate. The Dolphins and the Roosters. I mean, fair dinkum. Mate, I was actually, I'm trying to work this out. I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, but your tipping is like me at an Italian restaurant. It was just continuing the Italian theme here. Mate, I spend 20 minutes scrutinising the menu and then just pick garlic prawns anyway. So, mate, with that in mind, if I take the Roosters out of the equation, mate, if you can't actually pick the Roosters to make the grand final, who do you think is going to be in the grand final?
Penrith or the Warriors?
That's a bit of fence sitting there, Johnny. Come on, you need to channel your inner noise. You did a terrible job of it earlier in the round preview, but anyway, I'm going to continue to work on you. Okay, we have come to the end of the program, Johnny. As you can imagine, mate, there was an absolute deluge of vox popping with last week's Origin. Your phone was probably the same as mine. About 20 minutes into the second half, I thought it was going to explode. And in my case, it was due to my dear mate Phil Fay, who was actually imploding on the other end of the line. And it was highlighted by his all caps efforts of, surely Daly isn't our coach again next year. And he followed that up with, Teddy no more. So you couldn't even come up with connecting words anymore. And JC, mate, you are not off the hook here either. You had a few typical Johnny texting quickly without his glasses style gems. Mate, you sent this through after the game. Okay, this is what I would do. Drop Toto, put Shaq Bostock on the wing. You actually followed that up by rectifying your spelling of Shaq by writing Jack, just in case we thought you were talking about Shaquille O'Neal or the B-52's Love Shack. But hold the line here, Johnny. Drop Toto. I mean, the drums may be echoing, but just as sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti, mate, it's going to take a lot to drag New South Wales away from Brian. Oh, God, I hang my head in shame. Sorry, listeners. Rescue me here, Johnny.
Yeah,
Give me
look,
something.
okay, it was probably a bit of a emotional watching that second half, and yeah, I probably said a few things in the heat of the moment. Look, all right, I'm happy for Toto to stay, but look, just on Teddy, and God love him, he's in my eyes, he's the greatest Rooster that ever played. I'd still go back to Dylan Edwards at number one for the decider. I just think he understands Nathan's game a hell of a lot better, and I just think that combination could probably be the difference. So yeah, I think Dylan should come back.
Mate, it's starting to work. That Noz pessimism starting to rub off on you. That's the first even vaguely sort of anti-Roosters thing you've ever said. I think we should sort of record this for posterity. Okay, now in terms of recording for posterity, guys, we have come to the end of another program. So thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today. Remember, we have our feedback emails, jc@nrloffside.com, noz@nrloffside.com. Please keep sending us your thoughts. Keep sending us your content. You may feature in Vox Popping. But as always, guys, have a great week. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Stay well, listeners, and go the Socceroos for Friday.